I started my first official job, and by that I mean a job where I wasn't getting paid cash under the table, but actually had to fill out paperwork and was getting paid through payroll when I was 15 years old. And it started in the summer of 1986, and the title that I had was Teen Peer Educator, which is a bit of a mouthful, and we'll talk about what it meant in just a minute. But I'd like to sort of sketch this out for you. So, it was the summer in between sophomore and junior year, and I already was making money, cutting grass and stuff like that. But my mom said, you should try to find a job. And, I wasn't doing an awful lot over the summer anyway, and I did want to have some more money. So I got out the Waukesha Freeman and I started looking in the want ad section where jobs were being advertised. And one that I saw was for Teen Peer Educator, and it was for a job in Waukesha at the YWCA, that's the Young Women's Christian Association. It's sort of like the YMCA, only different gender. And it said that, they were paying a decent amount and that there'd be training and stuff like that. So I think I applied for some other jobs but didn't hear back from them. And I applied for this one. And if I recall correctly, I had to go into Waukesha, go to the YWCA, fill out the application form. I believe there was an interview of some sort, although it's my recollection is pretty dim about that because I remember so many other aspects of this interesting work. And so, I was told, I probably got a phone call or something. Yep, you're in, and training is going to begin on such and such a day. And the training lasted, I think, either 3 or 4 weeks. And it was every day, Monday through Friday. It would begin in the morning, I think around 9 o'clock. And then they would give us lunch. And then, we'd have the afternoon. And that was all of what we were doing for that entire space of time. And I didn't live in Waukesha. I lived way out in Wales, in the subdivision called the Hills of Delafield. And so I would each morning get my 10-speed bike, and I would get onto the Glacial Drumlin Trail, which is now very nicely paved and runs, a long ways. It's old train tracks that were ripped up and turned into bike paths, and it goes, I think way past Madison and now I think past Waukesha. At that time, the trail ended in Waukesha on the west side. So I would take it already to go visit my friends in Waukesha. It wasn't a big deal for me. It was probably 10 miles or so to go. So I would get on the trail in Wales itself and then bike out. And, it took me anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour because, you'd get to Waukesha, you'd get off the trail, and then you had another couple miles to bike into the YWCA as well. And so then, park my bike, lock it up, go in, and then we had these classes. And the classes were very interesting because what the Teen Peer Educator program was about ultimately was responding to the incredibly high rates of teen pregnancy in Waukesha County. Now, if you don't know anything about Waukesha County, back then, just as much as it is today, it was the Republican capital of Wisconsin. We used to joke about it being such. That's where a lot of the power structure was. And a lot of the people there, were sort of living out a Republican ideology, which back at that time meant don't have any premarital sex, don't use contraceptives, anti-abortion, all that sort of stuff. And as you can guess, you take a bunch of horny teenagers and none of that actually works. And so, pregnancy rates were quite high. As a matter of fact, when we moved to Waukesha a couple years later, from Wales, the girl next door to us actually got pregnant and had to go to a special school to finish up her high school. So it was a significant problem. And the idea was, here's where the teen peer comes in. They're not listening to adults, these middle schoolers and high schoolers. What if we took kids, high school kids, from 15 on up, not freshmen, and we gave them some training, not just in, sexuality matters, health stuff, but also human psychology and relationships. And then we had them go in and lead exercises and talk to these kids. They would listen to these kids because they're more relatable. They're peers, right? And no, that didn't actually turn out to be the case, but they were willing to throw money at it. There were grants available, and so they had this really cool program. And so for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, that's what we did. We had textbooks, and we learned all sorts of things about human sexuality. We went through every single topic that was discussable at the time. Obviously, we weren't learning about every single possible sexual combination or anything like that, but we were learning a lot more than we would typically get in a health class, especially in a county that was run by Republicans, where the education on that was more or less keep your legs together, don't have sex. If you do, somebody's going to get pregnant, and then it'll ruin your life, right? So we learned about contraceptives. We also learned quite a bit about a number of other things, including drugs and alcohol, some public speaking things. We did a lot of role playing, and we learned what sort of exercises we could lead these kids through. For example, one of the most popular exercises was to go in, and then I would be with the boys, and I would be paired up with a female teen peer educator who would be there with the girls. And each of us would have one of those big pads of paper, and we'd say, tell us about, what you're really looking for in a partner. What makes them attractive? What makes them sexy? What makes, for girlfriend material? We'd go down the line, and, pretty soon they'd say things like, attractive body and all that. And then we'd say, okay, we've got all these different factors. Now they get in a horrible accident, and their body is just ruined. So we'd start crossing things off, And then we'd say, what do you have left? Would you still stay with them if they weren't as attractive anymore, if they couldn't have sex with you anymore? And of course, the proper response that they would give is, oh, well, I would stay with them anyway because of their lovely personality or their loyalty or stuff like that. And we knew that that probably was not the case anymore for these kids than it was for their parents, who were, many of them were getting divorced or remarrying or cheating or things like that. And anyway, we did this whole education thing. So from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, and then we'd be cut loose, and then I'd ride my bike home to Wales. Oftentimes I would stop at Leduc's, which is a custard stand that's still there. Get myself a couple hot dogs, actually chili dogs, and maybe a malt or something like that, and then head home. And what was cool about this was I was getting paid to go to these sessions. So I was getting paid to learn things. And then once the program actually kicked off, we would get to leave school and go to other schools and lead these exercises and give talks and stuff like that. So it was fun to actually go somewhere else. Interestingly enough, some of the young men and women in the program were actually hooking up with each other, and so it wasn't that effective of a program, I think. And they were from all schools all over the Waukesha County area. So, I went to Catholic Memorial, and there were kids from some of the other Waukesha. There was North and South at the time, and I think there was somebody from McWanago and people from Brookfield and all different schools. And, so you'd get to meet a lot of other kids and you talk about all these sexuality matters. And it was kind of good for me to get to know things that weren't in our health curriculum. I don't think that there were that many things in the sex ed component that I hadn't at least heard of or wasn't aware of. But, it was a little bit more rigorous study. But then there was all the other cool stuff about like public speaking and, drugs and alcohol and, whatever else, relationship matters, human psychology. That was quite useful for me as well. And so I did this for the next 2 years while I was in my junior and senior year of high school. And it was, a nice supplemental income on the side. I don't think I did it that much my senior year, but, it was kind of cool to go in. The program was entirely ineffective. It did not move the needle at all on teen pregnancy rates. It doesn't appear to have been particularly useful for the schools. A lot of money, relatively speaking. It's not like, the kind of money that goes into building roads or something like that. But grants got thrown at this, and I benefited from some of it. And, maybe some of the other, not just the other teen peer educators and not just the people running the thing, but maybe some of the other kids in these schools where we were going in benefited from it, but there was no tangible benefit that we could actually point to. And fairly shortly after that, the whole thing was ended, I think, by the end of my senior year. And I don't know if they've tried other things like this, but that was, for me, one of the first jobs that I had where I was actually, getting paid in a proper way, you could say, becoming part of the vast system that, we have in terms of taxes and finances and things you can put on your resume. I think I've long since left it off my resume. But it was kind of a cool thing for a 15-year-old and then, 16 and 17-year-old kid to get to do. And, maybe even though it was a flop as far as programs go, it was a good thing overall to try. So that is the story of my first on-paper job as a teen peer educator for the YWCA of Waukesha County.